Then the middle brother spoke. His name was Khalid. Khalid said, my brothers, I too have studied the text extensively. And I too have read the Quran and have read the books of the scholars of the past. And all of this has led me to reaffirm my commitment to the religion of Islam. I am totally sure of this beautiful religion. I am a Muslim and I'm proud of it. Now, I must confess, my dear brother Salman, that a lot of what you said might be true from a historical point of view. But I think that your analysis is very superficial, that you haven't really undertaken a critical methodological study of the text of Islam. You are taking things out of context, without historical analysis, without really thinking about where these things came from. Firstly, you have to realize the Quran, no doubt it's a book from God, but it was revealed at a specific time and place. You cannot just take the understanding of a scholar 1,000 years ago and extrapolate it to our times. We need to think deeper about these verses. Realize that the Quran came to a group of backward people. People who were immersed in the eating of meat and carrion. They would drink blood and offer sacrifices to their idols. So when Islam came, it couldn't eradicate the eating of meat. No, it would be too radical to do so. Rather, what it did was that it modified it to make it acceptable, refined, sophisticated for the people of those times. Now, we have evolved to a higher level. And we need to explicate these verses and give them a fresh look in order to make them consonant with the times that we live in. As for these ahadith that you quoted, I mean, realize, well, first and foremost, the Prophet ﷺ, no doubt, I love him, I respect him, but he was a human being, he wasn't divine. Also, these books of hadith, I mean, they were compiled hundreds of years, after the time of the Prophet ﷺ. We don't really know whether they can be authentic or not. And if you look at it, there can be no doubt that the majority of times, the Prophet ﷺ did not eat meat. I mean, the same book that you quoted in Bukhari, it mentions that his wife Aisha said that 3 months would go by and no fire would be lit. So they're not eating meat for 3 months. And there are also many narrations where certain types of meat were presented to the Prophet ﷺ. He said, I don't want to eat this meat. Likewise, for most of his life, he would eat a vegetarian diet. Meat was not something that was common. And it is also narrated that the Prophet ﷺ rebuked a person for mistreating his animal. He rebuked a person for mistreating his animal. So is it possible that the same Prophet, the Prophet of mercy, who got angry when a person didn't feed his animal properly, would then command us to sacrifice an animal and eat it? I mean, use your mind, O Salman. Think, how is it possible that this Prophet of mercy will instruct his companions to be bloodthirsty on this day of Eid al-Adha? Every Muslim should go and sacrifice an animal. Think deeper than that. Don't just read these books of hadith and take it for granted. And as for these scholars of fiqh, I mean, come on, these are human beings. These are human beings who lived and died. They are not a source of authority. Yes, you're going to find scholars who had strange and exotic opinions, but you also find other opinions. For example, there's this other madhab called the Hanafi madhab. And this madhab, it didn't allow the eating of any meat from the sea, except for a certain type of fish. So all type of shrimps and lobsters and everything, the Hanafi madhab said, no, you can't eat it. So you see, we find certain parallels in the scholars of the past. When they had these views, these progressive views, we have to look at the spirit of the law and not the letter of the law. So, in my opinion, if you understand the general rules of Islam and work with them, it is possible to incorporate many of the modern ethics that we have with regards to our diet and our culinary opinions. And we realize that Islam came with the intent of eradicating meat, even though it didn't do so from day one. Therefore, I am a Muslim and I'm proud of it, and I say Islam does not allow the eating of meat. This was the response of Khalid. It was now Ali's turn, the youngest of the three, and also the most contemplative and intelligent of them. Ali nodded his head and began his articulation. He said, my dear older brothers, Khalid and Salman, although the outcome of both of your searches has ended in diametrically opposed opinions. The one of you claims he's a kafir, the other claims he's a Muslim. In reality, both of you are operating from the same paradigm. Both of you are coming from the same usul, from the same framework, from the same frame of mind, from the same principles. And this has led both of you to go into errors, even though the errors are opposite of one another. So both of you are coming from the same world, if you like, even though your conclusions are diametrically opposed to one another. The premise from which you commenced your investigation was to exceed the validity of what your culture has taken for granted, which is that eating animals is morally and ethically reprehensible and barbaric. It was this same basic premise which was accepted as beyond question by both of you that caused you, O Salman, to reject our religion when it clearly allows for the eating of meat. And it caused you, O Khalid, to improvise our religion and change it in an unprecedented manner. But both of you never questioned the validity of this belief. You never once asked yourself, is it possible that what my culture and civilization has believed in this matter is simply not correct? Is eating meat an ethical abomination? And if a civilization becomes vegan, does this mean that they are the pinnacle of civilization? That they are the first world or the primary world and everybody else is living in barbaric, backward lands? You see, my dear brothers, this is where you fell into an error. The correctness and validity of a religion should not be decided on subsidiary issues such as its position on eating meat. No. You don't decide whether a religion is valid by looking at whether it eats meat or not. Rather, a religion's primary claim of legitimacy stems from its theological positions, questions of doctrine, God, who is God, the nature of God, the purpose of life, the concept of an afterlife. This is where we think about religion. This is what we use to judge between the various religions. This is what we place our verdict on. We look at the theology of a faith. We look at the concept of God and the worship of God, and then we decide whether that religion is valid or not. And once we have decided that a particular religion is valid, then we must take it as an entire and total package. Because if we were to start examining every subsidiary legal ruling, trying to outguess the religion, then in reality we are not submitting to the religion, but rather causing the religion to submit to us. Now, Ali went on. Now, if we apply this criterion to Islam, we find that no other religion is as persuasive, as cogent in its appeal to legitimacy as the religion of Islam. No other religion has such a simple, perfect, rational theology. And this is something that I can clearly prove to you. The concept of Allah and His names and attributes, and that only He has the right to be worshipped, and He sends perfect human beings called messengers, and so on and so forth. No other religion even comes close. There's no competition. Islam beats all religions hands down. So when I came to this conclusion, when I realized that this is true, I then realized that I have to submit to the commandments that also came with the theology. It is not my right to separate the commandments from the theology. And when I looked at the Quran and Sunnah, then I had to agree with my brother Salman that yes, the Quran and Sunnah clearly calls for the eating of meat. The permissibility and the fact that it is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have been allowed to eat meat. This realization caused me for the first time to challenge the premise upon which our society lays its claim for fame, which is that eating meat is a backward thing. Our society claims it is the pinnacle of civilization because they are a society of vegans. They consider themselves the most civilized, the most mighty, the most powerful, simply because of this issue. But for the first time in my life, I had to look at this premise and think about it in a very deep manner. Never before had I questioned it, but now, because the Quran and Sunnah was clearly calling to it, I had to think about it. And I thought of a number of things. Firstly, Ali went on, how do we judge whether something is immoral or unethical? How do we judge? I mean, no doubt certain things, such as taking a person's property or even his life without any reason, we know from our fitrah that these are unjust and evil. But not everything can be based upon the fitrah. What might be appealing to you might be distasteful to me. And what I might like, you might hate. So I can't use my opinion to say that eating meat is unethical. How do we prove this point?